What's up, Falcons fans, and welcome to a very special episode of Talking Birdie, an Atlanta Falcons podcast powered by SportsTalkATL.com. I am your host, Matt Karoly. You can find me on Twitter at Matt Karoly, Karoly spelled Karoly, and I'm joined by one of my co-hosts tonight, Jake Gordon. You can find him on Twitter at Can'tGuardJake. And it is officially the bye week for the Falcons, so I wanted to do something special this week. So we brought in some of the brightest minds covering the Falcons on Falcons Twitter and the interwebs. It's going to be an informal discourse. We want to kind of do a state of the Falcons, the first 5 weeks of the 2021 season and the Arthur Smith era. Jake's going to help me moderate this. So let's introduce tonight's guests. We'll start with the headliner, and I know he doesn't like me calling him the headliner, but he's front and center right now. And you know, when you're the Falcoholic, you kind of get that title thrown your way. He's Dave Choate, a returning guest. He was one of our first guests several weeks ago, helping us talk ourselves off the ledge after a stressful offseason dealing with the Julio drama, quarterback situation, etc. So Dave, thanks again for coming back. To his right, you'll see David Walker, also from the Falcoholic, DW. Appreciate you coming back. He's also a returning guest. Top right corner, my Twitter arch nemesis, Aaron Freeman. Locked On Falcons host, one of the longest running Falcons podcasts, and most recently, a new writer, or returning writer, I guess, to the Falcoholic. And then we got two new guests, which I'm excited to have this week. Man down at the bottom, we go way back, Eric Robinson from our blogging dirty days. Both of us were able to get out of there and move on to bigger and brighter things. Eric especially, now that he's at the Falcoholic, and he's big timing it over at ESPN as a producer. We're all excited for him, happy for him. So Eric, thanks for joining us for the first time here. And then finally, last but not least, we've got Myles Garrett. Nope, not the defensive end from the Cleveland Browns. And I'm sure he's probably tired of that bit, although he has some fun with it on Twitter. He coming from us from Fox 5 Atlanta, covering the Falcons, all the Atlanta teams. So Myles, we're happy to have you. We're happy to have everyone. So thank you so much for taking some time out to talk some Falcons. So let's get right into it. Like I said, kind of want to have an informal chat here. State of the Union for the Falcons. So Dave, we're going to start with you, Dave Choate. Kind of talk to us about, what your preseason expectations were for the Falcons, and have they met them? Have they fallen short of them through the first 5 weeks? Where are you at as far as this team and what your vision was for them coming into this season?
Yeah, I'd say, record-wise, they're probably about where I'd expect them to be. I think I predicted 8 wins on the season heading into this. I kind of waffled between 8 and 9 wins. After that first game of the season, I was like, crap, I screwed up again. I was way too optimistic. Look at how awful they are. This is terrible. Things have gotten more on track since then. I think, I said after the first couple of weeks especially, and how dispiriting those were, that what I really wanted to see was some progress. Right. I wanted to see this team, especially on offense, take some strides forward, look a little bit more comfortable, show that they could, put up more than 6 points on a team like the Eagles. So they have made that progress. So at this point, 2 and 3 is not where they necessarily wanted to be. They could have very easily been 3 and 2, which is frustrating. But I'd say, given the progress that they've made to this point, given where they are record-wise, they're on track for where I think a little bit bumpier at the beginning, and maybe even a little bit better right now than I thought they'd be.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly thankful we're not talking about a 1-4 Falcons team as opposed to a 2 and 3, and they took care of business in London. And again, for me personally, I thought it was more of a dominant performance, and I think the final score will indicate. Obviously, the Falcons did Falcons things in that second half to kind of let the team back in, make it close. But certainly think, progress is being made. DW, I'll toss it over to you. Where are you at? Are you in a similar boat as far as record-wise expectations of what you had for the team coming into the year?
Yeah, I always thought the beginning of the year was going to start a little bit tough because you're installing a new scheme on both sides of the ball, brand new coaches, a lot of new starters, a lot of young starters, especially on the offensive line. You can say what you will about Josh Andrews, but the plan was not to start Mayfield at the beginning of the season, and that sort of got derailed early on. And that, I think, really threw a wrench in things. And I don't know that Andrews would have been fantastic out of the gate, but I don't think that Mayfield was the plan. So I think they're a little ahead, actually, on offense from where I thought they might be. You could argue that last week they should have scored 38 plus, were it not for some of their key mistakes, drops, etc. And I think you could have argued easily they would have had at least 33 in this past game with the 2 turnovers that were in the red zone. So I feel like the offense is really starting to click. Matt Ryan in particular, the past 2 weeks has been nothing short of brilliant. I think it's 2 of the best games he's played in the past 3 years. And I think that is a really good sign for going forward, especially as, this scheme is going to lean a lot on him with all these young guys, with a lot of new weapons that he's having to rely on, especially with Julio gone, which was sort of his guy that he would sort of go to when everyone else on the field was disappointing. He would just throw it to Julio, and that's not an option anymore. And I actually think it's making him maybe a little bit better. He's having to look a little bit more around at his weapons, and I think we're starting to see him click with this offense. So I think they're ahead on offense. I think they're on defense. They're a little bit behind where I hoped they would be, but I figured they were going to be around 500. Same with Dave. Somewhere between 7 and 9 wins, with 10 being an absolute ceiling for this roster.
Yeah, and I love that last point about Matt Ryan, not having that crutch anymore. I remember Deshaun Watson made a similar comment, when he lost DeAndre Hopkins, and it kind of turned him into a better quarterback. And yeah, I mean that, now he's got to scan the field more, and he doesn't have that safety blanket. Aaron, jump on in there. What are your thoughts, on this question as far as have the Falcons exceeded your expectations or fallen short through 5 games?
They've come in below my expectations. It's not crazy lower though. It's basically that week 1 game was probably the one outcome going into the season that I didn't predict, right? So I thought they would beat Philadelphia. I thought they would come out better in week 1 than they did. I think the last couple of games have generally gone, at least the results sort of mesh with my expectations. You could say maybe the process wasn't always where I thought it would be, but for the most part, I think, as others have pointed out, that they've shown progress each and every week. So I feel like they're trending in the right direction, even if they weren't as sort of their floor, I guess, starting out the season was not nearly as good as what I thought it would be.
Yeah, I'm in agreement as far as that Philly game. That was the one, real black eye thus far, where I thought they could take care of business there, and the Washington game would be more of a challenge. And it turns out, the Washington game, that was, the more winnable game, and they let that one slide. So, yeah, I agree there. Eric, provide some thoughts as far as what your expectations were and where the Falcons are at in your mind.
Coming into the season, I thought this team was, 500 team at best, maybe sneak a game or 2 in and possibly be in a wild card run at the end of the year, but not necessarily making the playoffs. And that wouldn't have surprised me. And I think right now they're kind of sort of on par with that. There's a couple things here and there that are occurring that I did have a certain level of expectation for. Right now I did have a real optimistic outlook on the run game. And so far on the season, the run game hasn't really been there unless you put the ball in the hands of Cordero Patterson. And that was one guy that I felt like was going to be a true wild card of this offense. And he has definitely exceeded expectations coming into the year. Outside of that, there's a couple coaching themes that I've seen from Arthur Smith. And I'm not going to bash him too hard because he is a rookie head coach and he only has 5 games under his belt. But probably the one thing that bugged me the most or kind of bothered me the most so far on the year was his handling of or his late game handling against Washington. It mirrored ghost of the past, of the Mike Smith era and the Dan Quinn era. And that is how they've lost so many games over the years. And, and I think he kind of just mirrored that and it ended up costing the team a win. And, they could have been sitting 3-2 right now and feeling a little bit better. But for the most part, I expected the team that's going to have some rough spots here and there, and that's what I'm seeing so far.
Yeah, and in regards to that last thing with Arthur Smith, we'll certainly want to get everyone's thoughts more in depth on that. But yeah, that's a great point. I mean, situational football, that's kind of thing that left me a little bit, something to be desired in the first 4 games. 5th game, not so much of an issue, but certainly if we're talking expectations when that was concerned, I mean, I think we all propped up this coaching staff quite a bit and we're very bullish on them. But again, Arthur Smith's the first time head coach, so he's going to, I guess, go through growing pains in his own right, calling the shots. And I think we saw a little bit of that early on. Miles, finish us off here as far as, what your expectations were coming into this season and where you think the Falcons have answered that call or fallen short.
Yeah, I think we all sort of have, similar predictions going into the season. I had them, hovering right at or below 500. Maybe a little bit above. I said preseason they could maybe threaten to be a fringe playoff team. I was thinking back to the Mike Smith days, where there were 0 expectations going into that first year, and they somehow made the playoffs with that roster. But as far as where they're at right now, I mean, it's really hard to not echo what you guys have said. There's been winnable games, like you said, against Washington, and they could very well, and they should be 3-2 right now, and I think we'd all be feeling a lot better about it. But I think right now you guys are right. They're right on par with that 500-ish record, and I do go back to what Matt Ryan said preseason in training camp. Everyone kind of looked at him weird when he answered this question online, is the fact that he said, I'm curious to see what kind of football team we're going to be in November and December, which, it's kind of fair to say after just 4 weeks we played, because, they've made steady improvements each week. First week it was the run game. It's a thing. The second game against Tampa Bay, it was like, okay, now they're scoring in the red zone. Third game against Washington, it looked like they had the passing game going a little bit. And then, the Giants. I missed the Giants game. It looked like they finally were able to finish off some drives. And then Washington, it looked like they put it all together, outside of finishing the game. And then I think the Jets was, sort of maybe their most complete half. At least the first half looked like they kind of put everything together. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what you can expect from a first-year head coach and, everything, the personnel he's bringing in. I mean, we have to be honest about the salary cap situation. They can't add anybody that maybe Arthur Smith wants or that Terry Fontenot wants right now. They kind of have to work with the cabinet that they have at the moment, which isn't a lot, especially on the defensive side. There's just not a lot of talent to work with. I do like the progression from the offensive line. I think, Jalen Mayfield has made a complete 180 so far with that opening day performance, and he's turned in decent performances. I think right now the biggest question mark is Caleb McGarry, because Chris Lindstrom is playing lights out. Jake Matthews playing really well. Hennessy's had his moments, but maybe I'd like a little bit more out of him. But yeah, Caleb McGarry has been my biggest question mark on the offense. And again, going back to Ridley, he's showing signs of maybe not being a wide receiver 1. And again, I'm not sure what this personal matter he's dealing with. I don't want to speculate on it whatsoever, but the against the Giants and against football team, it was a little concerning, some of the plays he had. So I'm hoping he steps it up a little bit.
Yeah, and the McGarry and Ridley situations are definitely 2 things to monitor moving forward. I think even going back to the offseason, the McGarry, there's a lot of uncertainty around what his ailment was or why he was out, and we don't know when Matt Gano's is going to come back. But right tackle is certainly that offensive line spot that potentially, there's going to be some open competition there. I feel like Mayfield now probably isn't going to surrender the job back to Andrews when he returns, unless he totally has like another, Eagles performance. But Jake, I'll let you jump in here, toss the next question, at our group of guests.
Yeah, and some of y'all touched on this already, but really through the first 5 games, what are some things you liked from Arthur Smith? What are a few things you disliked? And just some overall changes you'd like to see going forward to beat teams that aren't the Jets. Oh, Dave, you got to go ahead. Matt, you're muted.
We'll go in reverse order this time. Miles, you want to start us off with that?
Sure. Yeah. Some things that I like. I just like that we're going back to the run game. I mean, we knew that this was a thing that Arthur Smith was going to bring, but I just was feeling a little pessimistic of how well it would turn out. I was just thinking back to what Todd Gurley had his issues with his health and whatnot, but I just wasn't feeling optimistic that they'd be able to even establish a run game. And they have. I mean, Cordero Patterson is, I'm going to just say, he's been their best offensive player so far this season. I don't think there's a debate there. And again, it shows, I think, how much better this offense can be when the run game is there. And we saw that back in 2016. We've seen that every year this team has done something and made a run in the playoffs. They've had a successful run game. So I do like that. What I don't like, and I think all you guys are going to agree with this one, is just the conservative play calling at the very end. I think we've seen that in the Jets game, and we saw that in the Washington game, where second half, they have the lead, fourth quarter especially, and they start getting a little conservative. I thought, again, I think he did change things against New York when, Ryan went deep to Kyle Pitts. I was like, whoa, like, okay, that's an improvement from last week. You didn't try that. You aren't just doing these tosses to Mike Davis on 2nd and 10 and 3rd and 5, all this kind of stuff. You're actually taking shots. You're playing to win, not to lose. So I didn't like that, but I think that there's maybe some improvements, especially after seeing New York. So hoping that continues.
Yeah, Eric, you mentioned already kind of what you dislike, but talk to me about, is there anything you have liked from either the play calling or, what have you liked about Arthur Smith thus far through five weeks?
I like how he's using Cordero Patterson, and he's showing how previous offensive coordinators should have used Patterson. You didn't really see a lot of usage from him on the offensive side of the ball, really, until he got to Chicago. And even then, Matt Nagy, just a spoonful here and there as far as, during the game. You're not seeing him. You didn't see him get these volume of touches that he's getting now in Atlanta. And I want to give credit to Arthur Smith for that, because, Patterson can be a very unique player on the field, and he can create mismatches in just about every game, to be quite honest with you, because of his ability to line up just about everywhere. What I also like is his ability to really turn around the fortunes in the red zone for this team, which has been a true hindrance for them for a while, especially during the Dirk Cutter tenure. But his ability to, I think I saw a stat yesterday that said that they're tied for 7th in the league in red zone touchdown percentage. And that's better than Kansas City. That's better than the Rams. So when they get in the red zone, they're able to, put 6 points on the board. And that's something that a lot of fans have been clamoring for a while. So those two things I will give a really, I'll tip of the cap a little bit to Arthur Smith as far as him applying that on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I mean, those are two great answers. And, in regards to Patterson, Miles touched on the salary cap woes that Fontenot and Smith, had to deal with. And their biggest free agent spending was Cordero Patterson's 1-year, $3 million deal. So, and, we questioned it. We were wondering, well, he's really just been a kick returner for the most part for the entirety of his career. But no, they've unlocked him into a true offensive weapon. And God, I don't even want to think if the Falcons didn't have him. I mean, we could be talking about an 0-5 football team right now, potentially. I mean, he's really stepped up, and when his number's been called. So yeah, I love that shout out there. Aaron, what are your likes and dislikes of Arthur Smith through 5 games?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I like the high degree of play action passing. I feel like that's been something that we've gotten back to, from the Dirk Cutter days, where you questioned a lot of his misusage of play action. Like when he did call play action, a lot of the concepts that he ran out of play action weren't particularly good. He loved the tight end screen, which, I've watched so many tight end screens to Austin Hooper and Hayden Hurst these last couple of years that went for 4 yards or whatever the case may be. And that was sort of Dirk Cutter's go-to. And we haven't seen that yet from Arthur Smith. And hopefully we will not see that. Although I guess with Kyle Pitt, it wouldn't be so bad. But I like the usage of play action from Arthur Smith. As far as dislikes, most of my issues on the offense center on the wide receiver position. I think that's probably contributing to why Cordero Patterson looks so good, because a lot of their offense has been just checking the ball down to Cordero Patterson and him going out there and making plays. And he's done that superbly this year. So that doesn't take anything away from Cordero Patterson. That's a testament to how well he is playing. But I think a lot of it has to do with their usage of the wide receiver position, unfortunately, I was hoping for the Falcons to add a playmaker, a vertical threat that could help take the top off of defenses and help stretch this stretch the field, which we've seen the Falcons try to do a lot more effectively these last couple of games. And I think they need to continue to build off of that. Unfortunately, John Brown signed with the Broncos today. So basically all my hopes rest on Marvin Hall being brought back to Atlanta. And outside of that, then, you know, we're just going to have to make do with what we have. You know, Miles touched on Calvin Ridley not performing up to par this season. I certainly think that is more than a fair criticism of Ridley. I think some of that is owed to how Arthur Smith has not necessarily utilized him on some of the routes that he has been really effective at. That's one area I think Dirk Cutter did do a better job of, particularly last year. And you're seeing a lot more of those sort of crossing routes for Calvin Ridley, which, you know, I think certainly he's effective in that. We saw that in 2018 when Sark first took over. But, you know, I think running some of those corner routes, those comeback routes that Ridley did really exceptionally well, particularly off the play action stuff last year, I think will help benefit and make Ridley a more effective player. And then, you know, the other wide receiver stuff, I mean, I guess that's the main stuff with Ridley. I think to unlock his potential, I think you kind of got to get back to some of the stuff that he does particularly well, rather than just, you know, asking him to run these vertical routes and, you know, asking him to go over the middle and where he's going to be forced to make a lot more contested catches. And I think, you know, we knew this about Calvin Ridley coming out of Alabama, and it's been proven time and time again here in the NFL that when you have a receiver with his sort of questions around play strength and the fact that, you know, as I joke often on Twitter, he can't jump very high, which, you know, he proves time and time again, he's not going to win a lot in those contested situations. So I think the Falcons can certainly modify their offense in certain ways to get more out of this wide receiver group.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's potentially one of the last steps here. I mean, we finally got the Kyle Pitts game against the Jets. You know, Cordero Patterson's been a threat every week. The run game still probably needs to be fully unlocked too, but getting Calvin Ridley involved, getting him back to the heights that he was at last year, I think is what I want to see out of them coming out of the bye week. And again, I don't know how long he's going to be out with this personal matter, but when he does return, hopefully he does return. We start to see that. DW, anything that the three previous to you haven't mentioned that you want to add as far as likes, dislikes?
Yeah, one of the things that stood out to me when I watched the games in Tennessee is that in 2020 he dealt with a lot of injuries, and at one point had Tyson Breo at left tackle, and then lost him and went to a third string left tackle and still had success. So I'm quite happy with how the offensive line has progressed, and they've really faced a murderer's row of defensive lines in these first 5 games. The Jets came in with 13 sacks, which was tied for third. They didn't have any sacks on Ryan. And part of that was Ryan. I think Ryan doesn't get enough credit for how he maneuvers around the pocket. And I'm not saying this offensive line is fantastic at pass blocking. I still feel like they're at best average and probably, you know, below average overall. But they have improved week over week against some tough competition. And especially last week, I think against the Jets was their best performance as a run blocking unit. I felt like they actually got out and helped this run game get going early on. So I feel like the development of the offensive line, especially with 2 brand new starters, 2 young guys in the middle, is something that they deserve a lot of credit for. So if this offense is going to continue to be successful, I think it's going to start with those guys. And you know, certainly Lindstrom has the pedigree and is doing what we expected. But I think the quick turnaround from Mayfield, and even though, you know, Mayfield is not fantastic, he's sort of like a lesser man's Wes Schweitzer right now on his best day. But I think that's, for a rookie, that's a good turnaround in just a few games. And I like that development and the improvement in just, you know, a handful of games early on the season. Usually this kind of improvement takes an extended period of time. And I think we've seen some, you know, pretty dramatic changes in just a few games.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a coincidence. I mean, I think we've seen the last 3 weeks. It's been, you know, the offensive line showed steady progression, and the results have come from that as far as, the wins and loss column. And again, they should have been 3-0 the last 3 weeks. And a large part of that reason is because the offensive line, continuing to grow and get better and gelling. Dave, anything you'd like to add as far as likes and dislikes from Arthur Smith?
Just a couple things. Definitely a like is the adaptability that I've seen from him so far. It doesn't feel like this team is going to lose the same way 3 or 4 or 5 times a season, which is sort of, I think, what we got used to under Mike Smith late in his tenure, under Dan Quinn somewhat midway through his tenure. It's just a refusal to learn from mistakes. And so far, it's only 5 games. I feel like Smith has adapted a bit, certainly after the Washington game, and going really conservative in a way that I did not support, and trying poor Mike Davis, which falls under my dislikes. I'll get to that in a second. Over and over again when it was not working, I felt like he did a better job at the end of the game for the Jets. So certainly it feels like he's learning his lessons. And if he continues to do that, I think this team will get better. Certainly starting off again with that stinker in the first game made it seem like everything was up from there, which helped him in a way, I guess. But it was still nice to see. From the dislikes standpoint, I'd echo what Aaron said about the usage for Ridley in particular. Like, I think a lot of people are saying, maybe Ridley is not as good as he was hyped up to be. I don't really believe that. I think Ridley is fantastic. I think Ridley does have to be used in a certain way to really be as effective as he can be. And I don't think the way he's been used to this point is necessarily that way. And I think that, whatever they're doing with Mike Davis, I know it was a little bit better this past week, but that man is being asked to, power through 3 defenders on every other carry. One of his appeals is that his yards after contact are great. He has that physicality, but he shouldn't have to do it on every play. And I hope that, offensive line improvement and Arthur Smith kind of taking a look at things during the bye, figuring out a better way to use Davis, just to get more out of him, I think will be good.
Yeah, well, you had a great stat that you threw out on Twitter today. The yards before contact with Pat. Can you say that again?
Yeah, it was. Let me see if I can get this right. But it was basically they have about the same amount of yardage before contact, but Patterson has 21 fewer carries. So Mike Davis is not really getting any daylight at this point. And when he does get still a good player. He's certainly, that touchdown last week was huge, and that was all him and the offensive line working in tandem. But like he's got to get a little bit more breathing room to be as effective as he can be.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point because I think he's getting slandered a little bit on Twitter, and people are wanting to jump ship from him as the RB1. And I don't know if it's a dose of bad luck and the execution just isn't there on his carries as opposed to Patterson's, but yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I'm seeing. Every time he touches the ball, there's someone already in the backfield. And he usually ends up making that first guy miss, even the second guy. I mean, he's been great. He was great last year in the elusive rating metric that PFF does. So, yeah, I think both running backs have been fine. Obviously, Patterson has the highlight plays, and people always remember the highlights, not necessarily the 4 yards in a cloud of dust, the successful runs that are still successful runs. But hopefully he can get some breathing room and really kind of unlock his full potential, because I do think it's a great 1-2 punch, at running back. So next question, we kind of, again, we've been covering these topics throughout in your guys' answers, but I kind of want to talk or get your thoughts on, and it could be players or coaches, your biggest surprise. And you're probably all going to say Patterson. So if someone has a different answer, feel free to step in. And then also the biggest disappointment as a player or coach. Aaron, I'll throw it your way first. Do you have someone other than Cordarrelle Patterson that has surprised you in a positive way?
Ooh, I was wishing you would pick somebody else first because I needed a moment to think about a non-Cordarrelle Patterson.
Again, don't be shy, guys. Feel free to step in if someone wants to.
Jalen Hawkins.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, certainly got his first real, time as a starter. And again, after that Washington game with the missed interceptions, for someone to go out there and get the ball and make a play, that was huge. It was unfortunate that the Hayden Hurst fumble occurred shortly after, but yeah, Hawkins is a good one. it remains to be seen, if they stick with him. And if anybody's got thoughts on that, if you want to jump in too. But I don't know how long Eric Harris is going to be out, but I know, hopefully they're kind of, I think it was you, DW. So maybe this is a great time to get you in the chat here. You had mentioned something I think Arthur Smith said in the press conference as far as, typical college season, I guess, is 12 games. And, we're already through 5. We have 13 weeks to go, I guess, including bye. And maybe this is their whole point of kind of getting these young safeties involved. What do you think moving forward? Do you think we see now Hawkins more and getting more snaps, or what's your outlook on the young secondary guys? Backing up the vets.
And actually, Aaron and I went back and forth a little bit on this until I think he realized we sort of agreed on some things, and then it got boring, so we couldn't fight over it. But in reality, I think the coaches are sort of slowly bringing the rookies in. The exception clearly has been Kyle Pitts, and I think some of that is because they're lacking in weapons, and they needed to get him out there as quickly as possible. And again, I don't think the plan was to put Jalen Mayfield out there initially either. So I think their plan for every rookie other than Kyle Pitts was to sit them for a while, let them learn the playbook, let them get familiar with that, let them get settled into their lives, overcome some of the, as Aaron was pointing out, some of the mental hurdles that tend to slow down rookies as the year goes on. So I think their plan was always to sort of slowly bring these rookies into the plan, more and more snaps each week, start them off on special teams, just like with Richie Grant. And over time, begin to cut into the snaps of the veterans that are ahead of them. And I think that plan has been expedited because of some of the injuries that have happened. But I think this was always going to be the overall approach. I think they may have waited more till the midpoint of the season, maybe games week 8, week 9, before they really started to give like half or 60 or 70% of the snaps to the young guys. And of course, based on their performance, but they've said all along they have a plan for this. And I know fans want to see the young guys out there. And people have been saying, oh, well, if Grant looked this good, why didn't we play him out there, to begin with? Well, maybe he looked this good because he's been getting the right kind of preparation by the coaches. We can't have it both ways. We can't say, oh, well, Dean Pease is a fantastic coordinator, we should trust him. And then simultaneously say, oh, he should have played this rookie the whole time. Why did he sit him? I mean, maybe he sat him as a great defensive coordinator, a great coach, and that has paid dividends and has prepared him for, the last game he came in. So, I think the burnout factor is only a little bit of it, but I do think that, Aaron was probably more correct with what he was saying on Twitter when he, pushed back a little bit on this, and that the slow development of these guys is probably the right plan to begin with.
Yeah. Again, I mean, everyone, like you said, everyone wants to see the rookies right away. We certainly tout them quite a bit, as we cover the draft and stuff. But if you're in a position to play rookies right away, you're probably not in the greatest spot then, because, that means your roster's pretty bad. And, again, in fairness, the roster isn't great. But when you have veterans that have played significant time in the NFL, like Deron Harmon and Eric Harris, you're not rushing them. And, you mentioned the preparation. I mean, I think they knew Richie Grant was going to have to see the field because Avery Williams was also doubtful. And he was, the guy that filled in the Washington game with Isaiah Oliver. And so knowing that, they knew what the plan was going to be and gave him that proper preparation, to play split duties with him and Darren Hall. And I thought both of them, looked fine in their first action. So again, that's something else to monitor, after the bye week. But going back to the original question, anybody want to jump in and add another guy that they're surprised with, or if we want to get right to the disappointments, we certainly can.
Lee Smith.
Lee Smith.
We're talking Lee Smith.
That was
we got to talk Lee Smith.
I think we can throw
offensive weapon Lee Smith. That's right.
I think
he jumped higher than Calvin Ridley for one of those balls, man. Like that was amazing.
And got the feet in.
He is on pace to shatter his career highs in receiving yardage and reception. So I think we're ready to call it like it is and call him a weapon. He's ready to go.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for that, the tight end leak They've run it a couple times with Pitts. One of my crazy prop bets is Lee Smith's going to get, free on tight end leak, and Ryan's going to hit him. But now I don't know if he's an offensive weapon. Teams are going to be gearing to stop him. So maybe that won't come to fruition. But
You got a double team Lee Smith. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I think we can throw Ogundeji in the conversation as far as a surprise.
I think so.
Yep.
He and I know we don't necessarily tally close sacks as an actual statistic, but when it comes to this defense, that as something that that's something that we've been monitoring over the years, and he got his first sack this past Sunday against the Jets, and to be quite honest with you, he's definitely been in place to have a couple more, honestly, over the course of the season if the quarterback would have held on to the ball for another fraction of a second. But he's definitely come on. He's getting some pressures. I believe I think he's third on the team in pressures at this point. And he's I think as he continues to round himself out as far as developing goes, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he actually gets a couple starts later in the season as well. But yeah, we can throw his name into that conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, for someone, me personally, I thought he was going to be on a redshirt plan. I, compared him to guys like Stanley Mapanga and Malachi Goodman, guys that never really panned out. But I think a guy like Ogundeji can actually become something and can be a real contributor on this defense. And I think the biggest thing is, you notice those long arms, and he knows how to use them. He doesn't get overwhelmed by opposing tackles, which again is a pleasant surprise for a 5th round pick. And yeah, I mean, he's already now the third edge guy behind Means and Fowler. And when Fowler went down with an injury, he was that next man up, and he held his own. So I wouldn't be shocked either if he got some starts towards the tail end of the season. Miles, jump in there. Who do you any other guys you want to throw out there, either surprises or if we want to take it towards the disappointments? Certainly, I know you mentioned Calvin Ridley as a disappointment. If there's anybody else,
I mean, for me, I think one of the biggest surprises has been Dante Fowler, because last year, I mean, you're looking at him, you're like, is this all we're getting out of this guy? I mean, I was a little disappointed last year, but this year it looks like he's turned a corner. I mean, he's been working with Chuck Smith, who's a big time defensive end guru, if that's what you want to call it, maybe defensive tackle guru, and it looks like it's paying off. He's been a legit threat coming off the edge now. And I mean, he's been getting pressures on a good amount of plays. He's got, I think, 2 or 3 sacks now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
He just looks light years better than what he was last year. And the big thing is just that they have something to threaten a quarterback with now. It's not just Grady coming out there. I mean, to a certain extent, in certain plays it is Grady, but I'm not calling Dante Fowler a Pro Bowler by any means yet. But I do think that he's made significant improvement, and he has been a big surprise for me. Another disappointment that I have, though, besides Calvin Ridley, is, speaking of tight ends, I've been a little disappointed in Hayden Hurst. I was expecting him to perform a little bit better, especially in a contract year. And he's kind of disappeared for me in certain areas. I mean, I think he scored against the Jets, right? If I'm not mistaken. He got one score against the Jets, but he had that big fumble, and other than that, he's been really quiet. I mean, I just really haven't seen him make catches or contribute anything. It's been mostly just Kyle Pitts and Lee Smith from the tight ends that I've been noticing. So I was expecting a lot more out of him. I'm a little disappointed there, but again, I'm not sure how I saw his name come up as maybe like for a trade rumor today with the Cardinals, but I don't know if there's anything to that at all.
Yeah, I would echo both of those. I think starting with Fowler, I mean, I wonder too how much of like having more of a normal offseason this year as opposed to last year helped. I mean, I look at someone like Robert Quinn too, or both those guys the Falcons were in contention for in the offseason, and both guys were huge disappointments. One of the worst, two of the worst contracts given out last year. And now you look at him this year. I mean, Quinn's got 4.5 sacks in Chicago, formed a great tandem with Khalil Mack, and Fowler's been as good as you can hope, I guess. I mean, maybe you'd want a little bit more out of a guy what he's getting paid, but at least he's making an impact. He's getting sacks, getting pressures. He's affecting the quarterback, which is his job, and so it's good to see. I mean, I don't know if he's going to get 10 sacks, but he's certainly, in line to make some of that money back that is now in incentives if he keeps this up and stays healthy. And then, with Hurst, I'm with you. I kind of joked when I was watching the game on Twitter, but, I said to promote Lee Smith to tight end too and demote Hayden Hurst. I don't really mean that, but yeah, for what they gave up for him, and certainly doesn't make the trade look any better right now. And you were hoping for that 1-2 punch at tight end. That's, Arthur Smith. We all talk about how much he loves tight ends, and the fact that Hayden Hurst hasn't really, done a whole lot. Although I guess, in fairness, you can say a lot of the offense really hasn't exploded up until recently. But yeah, I guess maybe depending on where they're at going forward in this season, and if they're sellers, he could be a guy that they sell to try to get some compensation right away. Anybody else want to throw out any other disappointments?
Yeah, I got one.
We're going to say the same thing. Go ahead, Dave.
Probably.
John Kaminski.
John Kaminski? Yeah.
He was a guy that I thought at minimum could be a rotational piece of the defense, and he's been bad enough that I feel like he could be on the chopping block when they bring Josh Andrews back from injured reserve. And he was been inactive a couple of weeks, a healthy scratch. He was a guy that the Falcons made hype videos for last year, which never believe the hype videos, I guess, with teams. But yeah, I've been surprised at how poorly he has played and how much of a step backwards he's taking. Because at least last year he was in the rotation, and I think he played okay. He wasn't a great player, but he was not a terrible player. But this year looks like he's taking a step back.
I'm curious though, is it more because they're trying to mold him into that stand-up edge rusher that he may not be, or is it because of just bad practice habits? What really is it with Kaminski? I just looking at the tape, to me, he looks more like a 5-tech defensive end, but you're hearing whispers here and there that they're trying to make him into that stand-up edge rusher similar to Ogundeji.
Or to Teode Mariner. I feel like he was a similar body type, and they got him slimmed down, and now that's
I don't think that's his skill set. So I think he's kind of sort of being punished a little bit for doing something that he can't necessarily do, or he's not necessarily known for doing.
I would say, like, when you look at how they played him in the preseason, he played pretty exclusively as a 1-tech. Okay. And then when he did play 5-tech, I thought he played well. Okay. But obviously, I don't think putting him as a nose tackle when he's like, 285 or whatever?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's not a good way of utilizing him. And so I think, my thing with Kaminski, I feel like he's kind of stuck in a situation because he's not big enough to play, as a true D lineman in the way that the team wants. And clearly the team likes, like, to me, the role that he should be playing is the role that Jonathan Ballard is playing. But I think because Ballard brings a little bit more beef to the rotation, the Falcons like him a little bit more than that. And so, as you say, like, if the alternative is to move him as more of a pure edge rusher, like, I don't think he's really ideally suited for that role either. So, I think with Kaminski, I think it's fair to be disappointed by him, but I think at this point in time, we kind of have to put him on the similar track that we're talking about with some of these rookies, where I don't feel like we need to be overly judgmental on him not being active, because I just don't think the way that the Falcons want to utilize their D linemen and their edge rushers really lines up well for him to get the usage. But for me personally, I feel like, Ballard doesn't bring enough as a pass rusher that I would like to see what Kaminski can do in that role. And we'll just sort of have to see if we get more opportunities.
Well, the question with you for that, then, do you feel he has that wiggle room that a lot of the other rookies have when it comes to that development? Because honestly, going back to what DW saying, it doesn't seem like he does. It really seems like, I wouldn't be surprised if we wake up tomorrow and say, Kaminski's waived or he's cut or something like that. Like,
yeah, who knows at this point? It's hard to get a handle on how this coaching staff feels about certain players at this point in time. So it wouldn't shock me if Kaminski's on his way out, but at the same time, like, I don't know if what we have seen so far from him is a good indicator of what we could see from him in the future, I guess.
Because I thought it was telling too that, when they activated Mike Pennell or signed him to the 53-man roster and they came out with the depth chart and they put Pennell right behind Ballard at that strong side defensive end and bumped Kaminski to third string. And, to your point, Aaron, it looks like they like a little bit more beef at those spots. And Kaminski's kind of a square peg in a round hole when it comes to that role. And
I think it was more telling in the Washington game where they activated him. He didn't even play. They brought him on a game day roster, and he didn't even see the field after being a healthy scratch for 2 weeks. I thought that was.
No, absolutely. I didn't even remember that. I thought he got, I don't know how many snaps he got, but I guess he got 0, or did he get 1 or 2?
On defense, he got 0. He got like
0.
4 or 5 on special teams.
Okay. I missed that. So so he's basically been kind of almost a healthy scratch for the last 3 weeks, which, given the timeline, he's in year 3, or no, he was a 2019 pick, right? So he's in year 3. That's tough. At this point, he's not like a rookie where he's got 4 years here to go. So, I wouldn't be shocked either if they needed a roster spot and he's the guy, because he's been the only healthy scratch. All the other guys have been out due to injury. So, that's a good one for disappointments for sure. Jake, you want to jump in? Or go ahead, Dave.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was just going to say, I've had some question marks about how the coaching staff has been allocating resources on the defensive line in particular. I think that Tuioti Mariner is a good example of a player who, aside from a blip here or there, seems to be playing well in really limited snaps. But, he was inactive in week 4, which I thought was a little weird. And he really hasn't played much since the first week of the season. I thought that effort he showed on the sack to, get after Zach Wilson, fall down, get back up and finish was terrific. And certainly he seems like a player who could be contributing, and he's not really getting a lot of time there. And I think given the overall lack of pass rushing punch we've seen to this point, which was one of my big concerns going into the season, I'd like to see more of him. And so certainly the way that they have chosen to maybe sit Kaminski here, sit Tuioti Mariner there, hasn't made a ton of sense to me. I'm sure there's a bigger plan behind it that I haven't seen, but that would be one of my mild complaints so far.
Yeah, no, that's been a head scratcher. I mean, he's tied for the team lead now in sacks, and a guy that they talked up quite a bit. So a little bit confusing. I mean, Brandon Copeland, he really hasn't made much of an impact. And again, I did see him more in like that traditional outside linebacker in a 4-3 role at times in this past game. And again, I guess you can't use that really as an example just because Tuioti Mariner was active. But I know they talked about the defense looking different from week to week. To my eyes, I mean, it's been fairly the same. So I don't know if you can even say that, Tuioti Mariner being down is because, they wanted to get Copeland that, and run more of a 4-3 look. And, maybe Tuioti Mariner now at that edge role doesn't fit into that game plan. But all that to say, I'm with you. That's been a little perplexing and puzzling to see that limited usage of him when I thought he would be kind of their third edge. And now, he's fourth, sometimes the fifth guy called up. Jake, you want to jump in, toss out the next question?
Yeah. Oh, and another thing, another guy I was going to add on the end there. Kind of strange to see Michael Walker disappear after a nice rookie season, but who knows? Maybe they're deep. They're a little deep at linebackers. So the next question, I guess, just throw out an offensive MVP and a defensive MVP. If everybody wants to just save the time on offensive and say Cordero Patterson, that's fine too. I would probably say Lindstrom just to be a little different, but if you do have a different answer, feel free. But I guess we think defensive MVP would probably be better.
Yeah, I agree.
For offense, I'll change the narrative a little bit. I'll say Matt Ryan's the offensive MVP so far this season, especially over the past 3 weeks. Given the fact that he's dealing with a receiving core that has been, dropping passes left and right. The fact that he's still been playing well and his numbers over the past 3 weeks, I think he's well over 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, 0 interceptions over the past 3 weeks. And it could have been even better if these guys were able to hold on to the ball. So I'll say he's the offensive MVP so far.
I guess everyone else, we want to just keep it to Patterson. And then, it's Patterson.
It's Patterson.
Yeah,
I want to say Lindstrom too.
I just want to throw a little curve in there. That's
exactly. We got to mix it up a
Appreciate
little
that,
bit. Yeah, exactly.
There's basically 3 players that you would be picking from: Lindstrom, Patterson, or Matt Ryan, I guess.
Yeah. All right. What about
Agreed on that.
defensive, though, is an interesting one. I feel like there might be varying answers. So, Dave, we'll start with you. Who's your defensive MVP?
I knew you'd do that. I would say that my defensive MVP is still Garrett. I think, he's not necessarily making the big splashy plays, but a couple times a game he really pops. He does something ridiculous. He chases a guy 15 yards downfield, fearing for his life the whole time. But he's really the thing that makes this whole thing run. He's the best player on the defense. He makes so much possible for everyone behind him and around him. And to me, any not success that's a little bit unfair to that can be traced back to Garrett being destructive on a play-to-play basis. So he's still my guy.
Yeah, and I think with Garrett too, it's when he makes the big play that he just has a knack for it being timely, whether it's a 4th down, whether it's a 3rd and short. He hasn't really come alive quite as a pass rusher, but as a run defender, he's still one of the best interior defensive linemen that the game has to offer. So never a bad answer. DW, you staying the same way, or maybe a sophomore cornerback? I don't know.
I'm on the AJ Terrell train. He's, I think, had a much better season than people realize. I think he's allowing less than 40% of passes thrown his way to be received, which is phenomenal. And he is starting to turn into a corner that, the quarterbacks are going to start. Now, it helps when Fabian Moreau is the other guy. The quarterbacks are looking and saying, I like that matchup better. But we saw even in the Bucs game, like he made 2 really, really athletic plays to, deflect those balls. I think we're seeing him grow into the kind of corner that you can build around in the defense. And for me, I love Grady Jarrett. I think he's had another great season, but you sort of expect it from him. And for me, right now it's AJ Terrell. I think he's taken the next step forward that we wanted to see from him.
Yeah, definitely. Aaron, sticking similar path, or?
Yeah, Jared is my official pick, but only because AJ Terrell missed 1 game, and if AJ Terrell had played in that 1 game, he'd probably be the pick. So I'll give Jarrett the nod, but I'll echo the sentiments that everybody has already said about both of those guys. I think both of those guys are clearly far and away playing better than everybody else in the defense. As Miles and others have mentioned, Dante Fowler has stepped up, but not quite to the degree where he's in that conversation, at least for defensive MVP. But I think Jared and AJ Terrell are far and away the 2 outstanding players. And that's not, I don't think, a surprise to a lot of people going into the season from the expectations. The linebackers haven't been as good as I think we thought they could be with Deion Jones and Foye Oluokun. But I think they've both shown good things so far this season, but just probably not as consistent as we would like. And I guess we'll see if they can sort of throw their names into the hat in terms of what they can do after the bye week. Certainly both guys are capable of playing at a high level, but we just haven't seen it consistently so far this year.
Yeah. Eric, similar answer for you, or you want to throw out something different as well again?
Man, we're running dry on defensive MVPs here, man. Outside of Terrell, I think Terrell has played very well this season. I can only think of 1 play where, of course, in the Jets game, we had that pass interference.
Yeah.
That's really the only play I could think of where I looked at AJ Terrell and say, hey, man, what are you doing? Grady Jarrett has been stout, even though he's playing in a scheme that he hasn't been used to playing, and he's probably seeing more double teams now, or just about as many now as he's seen when he was playing in the 4-3. But he's been looking very solid as well. Outside of that, man, I really can't I can't think of anyone else. I would say if I had to pick a disappointment, I would definitely throw Deion Jones out there. I expected a lot from him.
Yeah.
And the inconsistency is really starting to show up a lot more this year than it did last year. And he looks, and I'm not saying he is, I'm just saying he looks a step slower. He looks like he's kind of doubting his instincts now. He's not really that linebacker that's trusting his speed and trusting what he sees and going after the ball. And I'm not saying he's regressing or he's getting up in age, but he just looks like he's very tentative this year, and it's hurting the defense, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think with Deion, I mean, you're seeing if he's not making those splash plays, the interceptions, he's kind of just been a somewhat average linebacker.
Well, even as
people don't want to say it, but yeah,
even as a rookie, when he wasn't making the interceptions, honestly, his assertiveness in the run game was always seen, and it was
Right.
always a positive sign because of his ability to shoot the gaps with his speed. And we're not even seeing that, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, and I would have thought too, with Foy being the Mike now and Deion being the Will, you'd get more freer opportunities. And yeah, we haven't really seen it yet. So yeah, I can't fault you there with throwing Deion Jones out as disappointment. Miles, any different answers, or do you echo the same sentiments? What are your thoughts, offensive, defensive MVPs?
Yeah, I mean, offense, Cordell Patterson, yada yada yada. Defense, I was gonna say AJ Terrell. It seems like that's been another theme. Really like what I've been seeing from him. One guy who I really did like what I was seeing from. Unfortunately, he was lost for the season for an injury. Was Isaiah Oliver. He took
I forgot
he
about
took
him.
a
Yeah.
huge step this year for the couple games we saw him play. And I'm gonna be honest, man, I gave up on him before this season. I was like, this dude is just not it. I just didn't. I wasn't sold after what I'd seen, and man, he was proving me wrong for the first couple games. I'm really upset. I don't know what the future holds for him because I think I'm not sure if this is a contract.
Yeah, he's a
year
free
for
agent.
him.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really unfortunate because man, he looked like a threat out there, and opposite AJ Terrell, and maybe at the safety position too sometimes. But I really liked what I was seeing from him, and it's unfortunate that he went down like that. But AJ Terrell, Cordell Patterson, it's kind of who I've got right now, and I think that's the theme.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up Isaiah Oliver because I think we all kind of forgot about him and kind of pushed him aside because of the season-ending injury. But yeah, if he was out there last week, I think he'd have a great case for being defensive MVP as well, along with Garrett and AJ Terrell. So we'll see. I mean, maybe the silver lining from the team perspective, and you never like to say this from the player's perspective, but having that season-ending injury, maybe the team can bring him back on a prove-it deal. And he stays healthy and plays like he did the first 4 games, and then he can really cash in. But yeah, that's been one of the biggest unfortunate. They've been pretty good, knock on wood, with injuries, but that certainly hurt, losing your starting nickel corner guy that was playing well. All right, we're getting near the 1 hour mark, so we'll duck out of here. We appreciate everyone. Spending an hour. Hopefully we'll get to chat with you guys all kind of individually, maybe throughout the season. So while we get out of here, Dave, I'll let you start. Plug. I guess you can plug for all the Falcoholic. Plug what you got going on. Plug where you can find everything online and on Twitter.
You can find us on Twitter at the Falcoholic. You should definitely check out the work of David and Eric. Since they're on the call with me, I'd be remiss not to single them out. Aaron as well has joined us this year, has been delivering some great weekly columns. And so we got a lot of great stuff going on. The bye week's always tricky because especially this early in the season, I don't think you can make any sweeping conclusions about what's happened, but we'll try to make sense of what's happened so far and where we're going. So
yeah, definitely. Again, Falcoholics, the gold standard, covering the Falcons for a long time, and definitely check out all their content. Aaron, what do you got going on? Locked On Falcons, you want a pub?
Yeah, Locked On Falcons is on YouTube now, so you can see this handsome face every day, 5 days a week. Telling you how the Falcons are disappointing me each and every day, like I do all the time on that podcast daily.
I
No, things
waited
are,
a long time for that. Yeah.
yeah. As things are trending up, we'll talk about the reasons why they're trending up. You can go to Locked On Falcons right now and check out the All 22 review on YouTube. So definitely subscribe. Check out the podcast on all the other podcast platforms, and 5 days a week talking Falcons is basically what we do.
DW, what do you got going on with the Falcoholic Pod coming up?
Yeah, well, we had a big week last week with our Matt Ryan interview, which was
Definitely,
a lot of fun. Great guy, as you would expect. And of course, we've got our weekly series, the post-game podcast with Evan, our statistical breakdowns from Pro Football Focus, and of course, our predictions going into the next game. We're going to have some stuff this week with another voicemail podcast, which has turned into a little bit of a favorite with fans. Hopefully having some good voicemails this week. There have been some very, very dark ones over the first 4 games. So we're going to have a lot of fun on the podcast. So yeah, check that out on Apple, iTunes, Google, wherever good podcasts are found.
And Eric, you're still doing the Falcoholic Live, right? What do you guys got going there?
Yes.
And anything at ESPN you want us to watch? Keep an eye on NFL Live. Let us know.
As far as Falcoholic Live, I believe we have Andre Rison on as a special guest tomorrow. So be sure to check that out. ESPN, I don't really need to plug anything ESPN. It plugs itself, to be honest.
Yeah.
NFL Live on ESPN and ESPN2 every weekday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Check it out.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely catch that out and check out that interview tomorrow with Andre Rison. And Miles, finally, Fox 5, what do you got coming up that you're excited that you can plug? Anything?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a little bit of a slow week, the bye week. I actually have this whole week off, so
nice.
Got so much time on my hands for the first time. But yeah, no, as always, we've got our Falcon shows every week. We've got Rise Up Tonight, Friday nights at midnight, Early Birds at 8:30 a.m. on Saturday mornings, and the Dirty Bird Report at 11:30 Sundays after game. So those are always really good shows. We dive in depth with as much Falcons content as we can. Week after next, we've got a really cool In the Nest guest. Today we talked to John Collins. So you guys can catch that interview coming up next week. It'll be really cool. Kind of gave us some insight on his favorite teams, all this kind of stuff. Told us his favorite player was second year guy, Kyle Pitts. So hope he's watching a little bit more football, but yeah, he's actually a big soccer fan. But we post a lot of stuff on for those shows. So give us a follow. You can see it on my Twitter at Miles Garrett TV.
And for those that are out of market, can you watch that online on Fox 5?
Yes, you can go to fox5atlanta.com. Okay. And again, I post most of the stuff on my Twitter too.
Great. All right, yeah, make sure you guys are checking all that out. Once again, really appreciate you guys taking out an hour of your time to talk some Falcons. This will be up. We're recording this Tuesday night. This will be up Wednesday. So make sure you're tuning in, hitting the like, subscribe on the YouTube, on the podcast channels, wherever you find your podcasts. So for Jake Gordon, I'm Matt Karoly for our great panel of guests. This has been another edition of Talking Birdie. Go Falcons.